I know you think I'm teasing about believing in God, but not all preachers believe in God, unfortunately. They've got a support group for them I was reading about the other day. Yeah. You have to believe in God. Not the God who is the figment of your egotism. The God who is watching is not the imaginary alter ego that encourages every selfish whim and justifies the breaking of rules for convenience. But the Almighty who sees and hears all those who are called to be instruments in the world to do the work of ministry according to the gracious will of the one who created heaven and earth.
Yeah.
This is not an inconvenient, necessary process in our path to success measured by fame and wealth. No, ordination is not incidental. It's not something you are enduring. It's not a notch you put in your belt or a piece of paper to be hanging on your wall. This is a holy moment where we again surrender our lives to Jesus. The bishop just stands in a physical way to give you a visual of Jesus that you may not have in your sanctified imagination. We say, beyond the ordinary, we will go with him all the way. The resurrection is not only a challenge to our theology, but it is a challenge to our spirituality. Whether you are true to the creed in affirming that he rose from the dead with a transformed bodily form, or you dance on the edge of orthodoxy with the notion of the spiritual vitality, yet not a bodily resurrection, the case is the same. Jesus is the foundation of ministry. His life within our hearts, because we said last Sunday, he lives. And how do we know he lives? He lives within our hearts. But that's not an excuse to spiritualize and compartmentalize a Jesus who is the foundation of our ministry. No, indeed. The text before us says that Jesus is not just the foundation, but Jesus is the presence and the power of true ministry. So that without Jesus' presence in our ministry, we have no ministry. It's not yours anyway. It's his. He lets you work it with him, through him, for him. As Paul wrote to the Corinthians, he reminds us that be careful about what you think about the work God has given you. Some plant and another make water, but they do it with a common purpose, he says in the third chapter. And he goes on to say, for we are God's servants working together. You are God's field, God's building. And then he ends up by saying, now if anyone builds on the foundation with gold, silver, precious stones, wood, hay, straw, the work of each builder will become visible. But the work is all divine. It's not yours. It's not mine. It's God's. And don't think that you can be judged by where you are. They won't be judging Reverend Woodward for this grand edifice and the wonderful work and the sacrifices that he made. They just premature by giving him all these accolades now. And he has done a wonderful job. But the fact of the matter is, you won't know how wonderful it is until he leaves here.
That's right.
You won't know what great preachers have been in your midst and pastors until they are already in heaven. Because it is after the servant has passed along and others come behind that you are able to truly assess what each servant has done, what their contribution has been, whether or not they built a monument to themselves that goes in the ground when they go in the ground. or whether they have built on the foundation, which is Jesus, the Messiah.
Yeah.
Oh, and so the text reminds us that as God has called us to a ministry of preaching and healing, and one where we walk unafraid, that we are called upon to recognize that Jesus does not leave us nor forsake us. For he is present with us, and it is not by power nor by might, but by the Spirit of Christ empowering us that we become effective in ministry. It is this sense of Jesus who works with us, who keeps us humble and lets us know that we aren't much of anything without him. That everything and anything that we are able to do is by the grace and mercy of Jesus. It makes us thankful. You know, we sometimes play around and sometimes we overplay. But, it used to be, Bishop, when they used to give out appointments, people, oh, thank you, Bishop, thank you, Bishop. You know, they were playing with us, just trying to make us get big heads. But the truth of the matter is, every appointment you get, you ought to be grateful.
Yeah.
Because there's somebody else who could have gotten it. There's somebody else who could do the job. Every time they elect you a trustee, you ought to thank the people. When they've appointed you and confirmed you as a steward, you ought to be grateful. Because even though you think that there are only 3 people there, that they had to make you one, no, God can always raise up another person. If the kingdom is dependent on just you, oh, it would make me not want to believe in God. And so we are hearing on this day and every day, what if God is unhappy with our praise? What if God is not pleased with the words we say? What if God takes away love and the Spirit from above? What if God is not happy with our praise? What if God is unhappy with the way we live? What if God is not pleased with the way we give? What if God takes away the love and the Spirit from above? What if God is unhappy with the way we live? And so we come to remind you, you got to watch the way you walk and watch the way you talk. And you must live a life that's pleasing to our Almighty. We must read God's holy word, and we must let praises be heard, just so God can be pleased with our prayer. And so the scholars tell us that Mark didn't write this portion of the text, more than likely. But it was important for the sake of the church that this message be included in the Holy Writ. And whoever wrote it with the pen, it came from God. That we have come to be preachers of the word. We have come to be the dispensers of the healing power. We have become those who will walk on snakes and drink poison and still survive. But it lets us know that it's not because you all that. It's because of the presence and the power of Jesus. And so for just a few more minutes, let me just lift up 3 points and help you to move on. We must, if we are going to have a ministry and live a life and render service in the church as lay and clergy alike, we are going to render a life that is pleasing to God, then we must be able to be those who will lift up a preaching that is not based on ourselves, but a preaching that is based on the presence and the power of Jesus. Stop worrying about the stuff that we worry too much about. You know, you go out to the robe vendors and you want to find one that's fancy, that suits you. Don't you know that robes don't save people? Some dying to wear purple. Don't you know purple doesn't save people? Some think they're special because they're wearing blue, but blue doesn't save people. We worry about stuff that doesn't save people. How are we saved? By the word